Welcome to Bon Voyage Besties. My name is Rachel and my co-host is Rosa. Today we're going to be discussing, fortunately, one of my favorite topics to talk about, which is a fear of flying. I experience a fear of flying quite frequently as a traveler. And today we're really lucky to have a special guest with us, Brian Morris. Brian is a self-proclaimed former fearful flyer who turned his turbulence into triumph. Brian created the groundbreaking flight deck fear of flying flashcards, which I actually own, and they really, really help a lot, helping others conquer their fears and take the skies with confidence, a dash of humor, and some serious expertise. So let's welcome Brian to the show. Hey!
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, we're so excited to have you. And the flashcards, they're awesome. I have a couple decks of them, actually, and I love to bring them on my flights. They're really, really cool.
Which one's your favorite deck? The rainbow?
I love the rainbow. When I got them for Christmas, I was so excited. They're really, really cool. Yeah, I love the rainbow set. They just like pop and there's something special about them.
Yeah.
And they are really useful. And we will definitely talk about them in this episode. But to start off, Brian, when did you first experience the fear of flying? And what do you think triggered it? Because I know for me, there's a very specific event that triggered my fear of flying.
Yeah, I had a specific event as well. It was my first time flying as a child. I think I might have been maybe 12. And we had driven from Salt Lake City, Utah, all the way to Homer, Alaska. So it was, I think, 7 or 8 days in a car driving down dirt roads. It was back before they had paved roads. And we got to Homer, and I knew the entire time that when we got to Homer, we were going to take an airplane ride over to the island that my dad's from. And so we were really excited. We were going to fly on an airplane for the first time, but I didn't really know what to expect. And when we got there, they started putting us through, at the time it was a wand rather than a magnetometer that you walk through. So they were wanding us. And I remember asking my dad, why are they doing this? And he said, well, there could be bad people on the plane. They could try and take over the plane, or they could blow up the plane. And they're just trying to keep people off the plane who might have bad intentions. And that was my first sort of anxiety of like, wait, this doesn't seem as fun as I thought it was going to be. It seems like it's dangerous. But of course, they checked us all out. We got on the plane and we took off, and it was amazing. I mean, the plane lifted off into the air, and I was sat by the window and I could see everything going on. And it was probably a short flight because we were just going from the mainland to Kodiak Island. It was probably, I don't know, maybe it was an hour flight. But we were in a twin prop plane, it had big 2 propellers on the front of it, not like what, you probably flew on yesterday. But when the wheels, for some reason, on this aircraft were underneath the wings, and when the wheels dropped down from underneath the wings, for some reason, there was a optical illusion or something where I thought the wing actually fell off the plane. I don't know why. I was young, but I went into full panic mode. I think I screamed. I know my dad was holding me and trying to keep me calm. And then we landed. And the whole experience for me, I forgot to also throw in, there was a lot of turbulence, right? We were flying over the ocean in Alaska, and that was really unexpected and scary for me as well. So when we landed, I remember telling my parents, I'm never getting on an airplane again. This was too much for me. As a child, I had a lot of anxiety anyway. I've always had anxiety, and it just didn't seem like something I wanted to ever do again. So luckily, we spent our time on the island. I think it was a couple of weeks. And one of my uncles, my dad's brother, lives on the island, and he doesn't fly at all. And they have a ferry boat that goes from the island to the mainland. And I think it's about 17 hours in rough seas in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And luckily, my uncle is afraid of flying. And so he said, well, we're all just going to take the ferry boat back over to the mainland. Well, that was even worse than the flight. It was rough seas, waves were coming completely over the boat. I remember my dad was seasick and throwing up everywhere, and it was a bad experience. So anyway, from that moment forward, I just had a really hard time flying. And the biggest problem for me is that I wanted to travel and see the world, and I wanted to travel a lot. So I had to start figuring out a way that I could fly. But I had a very, very long time before I started flying again. But it was that very first flight as a child that really set off my fear.
Yeah, that's definitely triggering. I can imagine very first flight, you're super excited, and then it turns into this pile of awfulness. I can't imagine taking a 17-hour ferry ride back. That definitely sounds way worse. As much as I hate turbulence, I will take the plane every single time over a boat ride that long. That just sounds horrifying.
Yeah. it was pretty rough.
Yeah, that's really super intense. It's funny because, like, with my fear of flying, it didn't start later in life, but my mom actually tried to potty train me on a turbulent flight, and I always wonder if that had something to do with my fear of
Yeah.
turbulence later. I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe.
Wow.
That's an odd spot.
I
Yeah.
know, right? Definitely.
I mean, when you gotta go, right?
Right? Yeah, there's
Yeah.
nothing you could really do about it. So, with this fear of flying during your journey, was there one particular aspect of flying that scared you the most? I know for me, I'm always very apprehensive about takeoff in particular.
Yeah. I'll honestly, takeoff, of course, makes me nervous. I think a lot of people that have a fear of flying will tell you that. My biggest fear, and I just started to realize this honestly, when I thought about doing this podcast this morning and what I might talk about, I realized that the thing that scares me the most is dropping out of the air. I know this is going to sound really weird because that's rarely what happens. Most accidents happen on takeoff or landing, but takeoff and landing doesn't really bother me. I mean, I'm revved up for the takeoff because I'm already nervous, right? And landing's very exciting to me because I feel like it's over. And I love that floating and gliding in and setting down. But the most recent incident that happened, I actually watched the video of it, and I have
I
a
did
rule.
too.
I don't watch incidents. I don't listen to them. I don't talk about them. I try and stay away from them, but I feel like I'm, moved on in my journey a little bit more, and I'm not really afraid of flying anymore. I mean, I'm a little bit nervous. I'll probably always be a little bit nervous because I created this for myself from a very young age. But I did watch that plane crash, and for some reason, it didn't bother me so much because I felt like they didn't really drop out of the sky, right? The crash was on landing and it was on the ground, and I thought, I'm probably okay with that. I think it's mostly for me being in the air and the plane dropping. Have you ever been on an airplane and the plane drops what seems like, in your mind, thousands of feet?
Yeah, you feel it in your gut. That's why I don't do roller coaster, and that anxious feeling, that's like nerve-wracking, especially if you're
Yeah.
sleeping. That's happened to me on multiple occasions when I'm just like woken up and I'm just like, it's
Yeah,
not
and
a
I
fun
think
feeling.
I think for me, that's the fear for me is that period of time where you're in the air and not knowing if you're going to have some of those drops or if there's going to be severe turbulence. But that's pretty much it for me, is that feeling.
Yeah, that's really relatable because I know for me, my fear of flying, it started with a flight to Italy. And I never used to be scared of flying till I was about 24, I think is when I went to Italy. Before that, I saw it as like a ride and something fun. But when we were over the North Atlantic, we hit some pretty severe turbulence and the plane dropped. And the turbulence went on for a good 10 minutes. And I still vividly remember my mom's wine glass flying out of her hand and hitting the ceiling and overhead compartments opening. And it was horrible. And ever since then, I've always been really nervous with cruising, particularly over the ocean. So it absolutely makes sense. It feels like a roller coaster. It's not fun. And like you, I came across the video of the recent incident yesterday.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it shows how like anxiety is. It almost didn't seem real to me. It looked like a scene out of a movie. Landing's still my favorite part, and I don't think that'll change. But it goes to show you how irrational anxiety can be.
I really believe that too, because both of the last two major incidents were both on landing. But I still don't feel afraid of landing. I think landing's my favorite part. I think it always will be.
Same here.
Not for me.
No.
I really don't have a fear of flying. I'm usually pretty good. My anxiety, it's more the process of being in an airport. That's the part that I dislike the most about traveling. But I actually feel pretty comfortable and safe when I'm on a plane, except for the landing part. That's normally where I'm holding on to both sides of the seats and just close my eyes and pray to God that we land safely. That's the only time throughout the whole entire flight that I get really anxious and a little bit nervous, especially when you do start to feel the drops. Rachel and I were coming from Florida yesterday, and we did hit a little bit of turbulence. So as soon as they announced it on the speaker, like, the seatbelt sign is coming on, do not get up your seat, not even the flight attendants. I was like, oh no.
I'm poor about it.
I
Yeah,
was like,
I
God,
think
please.
last couple of flights I've been on, they've been very descriptive and very, what I might say, stern about their direction and what's happening, where I think the year before that, it seemed a little less strict. It was, we're coming in, we're going to do this. But now the last few flights I took, it seemed like very extremely serious about where you need to be and what you need to be doing on landing.
Yeah, and that's a
Yeah.
good point, because just hearing the flight attendant and, like you said, the stern voice over the loudspeaker, that made me anxious, because now I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, like you can feel the intensity in her voice. I was like, this is pretty serious. Like, we're going to hit some really bad turbulence. And we did, we had high gusts of wind, so it was a little bit rocky. To me, it was not unbearable. I had worse experiences, but like you said, just like the lack of comfort in her voice kind of made me a little bit uneasy.
Yeah, they were really serious. And I noticed the same thing because I remember flying a lot last year. And there were even moments where the pilot in the beginning wouldn't even come on the loudspeaker and explain like the length of time or the weather. But now I've noticed right away that they're being really specific about things and being more stern. And like Rosa said, in Newark yesterday, there were a lot of gusty winds. Unfortunately, we were flying the same day that the incident in Toronto happened. I called my mom when I got home because she likes to check in on me after I fly. She asked if I knew about what had happened in Toronto, and I had no idea. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would have really been gripping the seat landing into Newark.
Do you grip the seat to hold the plane in the air?
I don't even know why I do it. I like grip the seat and I sit really still and I close my eyes. And luckily yesterday I did pop a Xanax because I did know there was going to be gusty winds. Normally for a flight, it was only an hour and a half. Normally I wouldn't do that. I save it for the longer flights to Europe. But yesterday I was just like, no, I was like, medication is needed with this landing because I knew going in.
Yeah.
Just go to sleep and just like, hopefully when I open my eyes, I'm in safe territory and landed safely at my destination.
You're lucky I can't sleep because I feel I have to be up and make sure the plane's still flying. Like I mentioned before, I'll grip the seat, but I'll lift because I feel like I'm keeping the plane up in the air. So you can all thank me. I am the person who kept the plane up in the air the whole time you were flying.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Brian's holding the plane up in the air. It's cool. Nothing's going to happen. Yeah, I'm always jealous of people who can sleep on planes. I always say if there was like a way to magically bottle that up and sell it, like Rosa, you would be a multi-millionaire because I can't sleep on planes. When I flew to Tokyo, I'll be honest, I took 3 Xanax pills because it's a 14-hour flight and I was really nervous about it. I still couldn't fall asleep. I was just like, oh my gosh, it does not matter how many of these horse pills I take. I just cannot go to sleep. I have to make sure everything's okay at all times.
No, I get very anxious just like sitting still for a long period of time. And sometimes I'll try to watch a movie or read a book and keep myself busy, but I just can't sit still for a long period. So I figured the best way is for me just to sleep through it. I do wake up strategically whenever they're coming around with food and drinks, though. my
It's
my
the
body
best time to
knows.
be awake.
So another question, since we're talking about, fear of flying, a lot of people try to give advice, but it's usually pretty unhelpful. Like, oh, you can just get over it. Or, oh, statistics are on your side. It's going to be okay. How do you handle receiving that unhelpful advice? Because I always thank people, but kind of am rolling my eyes on the inside like, this isn't going to do anything.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And I think it's interesting because I think most people who have extreme fear of flying, I think if you're a little bit nervous, maybe those statistics help you. But I think people who have an extreme fear of flying, we've all heard the statistics. We all know them. But like you said before, if you have an irrational fear and it's a fear of flying, none of that's really going to help, right? And I always go back to, well, if we're up in the air 32,000 feet and the engines go out, they can fly on one engine and they can also fly on no engines if they need to. But if you're in your car, generally you pull off to the side of the road. And if you're in the air, I don't know, there's really no place to pull over and fix what the issue might be. Those used to be the things that I would focus on and think about a lot. And I'm like you, I would just say, thank you. I appreciate that. I did go through a period of time where I would tell people I have a fear of flying and they would start their sentence, oh, let me tell you what happened to me. And I would say, please don't tell me. Because I have a rule that I don't listen to those stories. I don't watch the news. I don't do social media crashes or anything like that. Because I think the more I feed myself with that, the more I'll let it grow, the fear grow, and the more anxiety I have. So I do have a rule if people are about to tell me their fear of flying story. I mean, I have how many friends? None of them have ever been in a plane crash. So generally it is they had some rough turbulence or something like that. But I try not to listen.
Yeah, that's always good advice, especially the social media thing. And I know for me, when I started getting a fear of flying in my 20s, I was like, well, let me research this a little more. And I started watching National Geographic's Mayday. I know it's good for aviation experts, but if you have a fear of flying, I do not recommend doing that because it really set me back quite a bit. So if you're listening and scared of flying, don't watch Mayday. Just don't do it. It's banned. Don't watch it. Don't do it.
I don't know if you know this about me. I used to work in the media. I used to work for the local CBS station in my city, and I was a photographer. So I would go out and film accidents, murders, all kinds of crazy things. And there's a couple of things I found out. A lot of people who work in the media, especially news media, TV, video, is a lot of people in that industry have a fear of flying. I have a couple of friends who are news anchors still that have done interviews with me, or we've talked about their fear of flying. And I think a lot of that is for the same reason. They've seen all of the accidents, whether it was on our news or not, all of the feeds come into the TV station. So you see the accidents from all over the world whenever they happen. Of course, they're always sort of explosive and scary. Even if everybody survived, like the recent incident, everybody survived, but the video is still scary, right? The plane was on fire for a period of time. And I think those things get ingrained in you. And so I just realized that I needed to stop feeding myself with those fears. And I do know, and I think, in our fear of flying groups, people have talked about this a lot, but the news media are going to continue to play that video for a long period of time. And they're going to wait until there's a result of what caused the plane accident. They're going to bring it back again, which is going to be a couple of months to 6 months from now. They're going to play the video again because it's great video to play and get people to watch your news and get people scared. But I generally try and stay away from it if I can.
No, I definitely think that's a good strategy. Especially like you said, it's, social media nowadays, it's hard to cut away from that. I know from my own personal experience, I'm the same way. I'd rather not look at any negative videos just because I don't want to have that thought in my head, especially when I'm getting ready to be on a long flight. So that's a great strategy. Now, Brian, do you have any other strategies that help coping with your fear of flying? And we would also love to hear more about the Flight Deck 365.
Yeah. I do. One thing that I like to tell people is one thing that really works for me is to stay hydrated. So I drink a lot of water on the plane before I get on the plane. I learned was the more hydrated you are, the less anxiety that you'll have. When you start to become dehydrated, your body starts to create all kinds of chaos, right? Or you'll probably have a more rapid heartbeat, and you just feel dry. Staying hydrated really helps with, your anxiety and your fear of flying. One thing I love, of course, is music. So I always download my music. I made the mistake on my first flight after not flying for a long period of time of bringing my phone, but I didn't realize I needed to download the music onto my phone, and I didn't have internet service on the plane. So now I know I download all my music, and even if you do have internet service on the plane, who knows if it's going to be working or not. So I always suggest that you download your music. We were talking about turbulence earlier, and I have a trick. And I don't know if you've ever tried it before, but it's my favorite thing. It's called dancing with the turbulence. And what I do is I put my headphones on and I turn up my music really loud, and I kind of do this bobbling thing, and I look crazy. Everybody on the plane probably thinks this is the guy that's going to go nuts.
We're doing the Brian.
Open the door.
I know. Well, I do have a story about that. I don't know if you watched my TikTok or not, but I can tell you that in a minute if you want. It's a pretty amazing story. But anyway, I do this dancing with turbulence, and I can't really feel the turbulence over my movement, right? And so I guess in my mind, I feel like, hey, I don't even know if we're still going through turbulence, but I'm having a good old time over here with my music, and I'm doing my little dance. But try it next time. I guarantee you it works.
It's like a silent disco party.
It's just like a little silent disco. I know the people in the back are like, are we missing? What are we missing out on?
It's a party.
Yeah, right?
I like it.
Yeah. The other thing that I do, of course, is breathing exercises. Do you do breathing exercises? They're my favorite, where you breathe in and you hold it for a few seconds and then you blow it out and do maybe 10 of those. One thing I learned from a psychiatrist was that your body has a very difficult time having anxiety or a panic attack if you're doing breathing exercises. So it's one of the main things that I do. The other thing I do, and this is even prior to the flight, this might even be weeks before, but I do a lot of self-talk where I tell myself everything's going to be okay, everything's going to be fine. And I always tell myself that flying is safe and flying is fun. I'll be driving down the road and I'll repeat that over and over and over and over because I've told myself so many times that it's not safe and that it's not fun and that it's scary that I've got to now get those moments back to where it is safe and it is fun. And so I continue to do that. If I have a mini thought of fear of flying, I immediately start telling myself, flying is fun and flying is safe. I used to drive by the airport and it would give me anxiety, and I no longer have that anxiety anymore.
Yeah, that's a really awesome thing to do because I know sometimes with me, I'll either psych myself out or run to a fear of flying group and be like, please reassure me, please reassure me. And that reassurance seeking sometimes I feel does more harm than good. So I
Yeah.
think positive self-talk is a really good way of looking at it because it's like a habit you need to break, right? You've like
Yeah.
trained yourself to think flying is unsafe when that's, not the reality. It's far safer than driving. So doing some positive self-talk to counteract that is important. But I do definitely want to hear about the airplane door because
Yeah.
I'm very intrigued by this. I feel
Well,
like it's story time.
can I say one more thing before I do that?
Yes,
Just
absolutely.
on what you just said, I think it's really important to do maintenance on your fear of flying. So I would claim that I am a fearless flyer now. I do have moments, this new accident that came up where I have to kind of think about it. I think I could get on a plane tomorrow and be fine, but I think I need to maintain that, right? So I need to continue to do my work, continue to check in with my groups. I belong to a couple of Facebook groups and a Reddit group, and everybody's giving their positive energy and helping each other out. And I think it's important to not just believe that you don't have a fear anymore and walk away from it. I think you've got to maintain what you've got going.
Yeah, definitely. The groups have really helped me a lot, just like all that kindness, and especially people who work in aviation who volunteer their time to talk to fearful flyers because they have a hectic job. I mean, being a flight
Yeah.
attendant, you're very busy. Being an airline captain, you're very busy. Air traffic controller, all very demanding jobs. And I do think it's incredible that they take time out of their schedule to talk to me and you who have these anxieties and to help us out.
I had a pilot once flying on Delta Airlines who knew that I was having an issue getting on the plane that day. Somebody had alerted the pilot that I was having trouble getting on the plane, but he came off the plane and got me, took me on the plane, had me do his checklist with him. Then he set up my seat for me while I was talking to the co-pilot, went and put my bags away and sort of got my seat ready with a drink. And he came back and said, hey, we're ready to take off now. Everything's ready to go. This is going to be a great flight. I've already looked ahead. Turbulence is light and your seat's ready. I went back and sat down and I was like, man, that was just really amazing that somebody took that time and energy to, work with me. But the reality is they don't have time to do that every time. This was just a really great pilot that wanted to help out. But you're right. I mean, these are amazing people that do what they can to help us. And I really do appreciate that a lot.
Yeah,
And I think even
definitely.
preparing to get on the flight, that's a good point. You feel reassured when you kind of get that extra sense of customer service and support. It makes
Yeah.
you feel a little bit more confident on the team that are going to be on that flight that day as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I had a couple great pilots with United. I remember flying after COVID to Switzerland and coming home. I was already under quite a bit of stress because you had to test the day before, and there was a lot of anxiety there. Like, am I even going to be allowed back home? I was just like really not like feeling great. So the flight attendant noticed, and I told her I was scared of flying, and she was like, come with me. I want to show you something. So my mom thought I was getting upgraded to first class, but instead she took me out to the cockpit, and the pilots were so sweet. They were like, we're going to take such good care of you. We can handle anything. Here, look at like our map. We'll show you exactly where the turbulence is, and we believe in you. And they gave me a little set of wings that I have in my bag now that I take with me. It's really cute. And then the flight attendant, she just kept checking it on me. She bought me a coloring book, and it's meant for kids. It was like My United Adventure or something. And she was like, I wrote you a coloring book. And she got me orange juice, and she left me like a little note saying how proud she was of me. So it made me feel really good. Like there are really compassionate people who work in aviation and want their passengers to feel safe and comfortable.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was really, really awesome.
All right. Are you ready for the story? It's kind of a long story, so I'll try and make it as brief as I can. But I was flying to Hawaii with a group of friends, and one of the friends was an employee for an airline. And so he had tickets on that airline. I had tickets on this airline. So you have to think about this. I'm flying all by myself and I have a fear of flying. And so I get on the plane and I do pretty good. The plane takes off and everything's going well. And then like we talked before, there were one of those incidents where the plane dropped and I just lost it. I don't know what it is. I don't know what flipped for me, but I unbuckled my seatbelt and I jumped up and I rushed to the door. And I wasn't far from the door. I was probably maybe 3 seats back, and it was the main door that you come in. And I saw the flight attendant look at me. She had these huge eyes. And you also have to know, this was before 9/11. I think I was 18 or 19 years old. So let's just say it was a couple of years ago, okay? And so
We went through the math. We went through
I
the
don't
math.
want to say, I don't,
So it's fine. Don't worry.
So I reached for the door I mean, it's obvious. I know if I opened that door, which I don't really think I ever could, but if I did, I think that the situation was going to be worse. But I reached for the door and I felt her tap on my shoulder, and I turned around and she said, "Is everything okay? Can I help you?" And very calm. And I said, "I'm having a panic attack. I need to get out of here." And she said, "Well, we're in the middle of a flight. We're 30,000 feet in the air. That's not going to be able to happen. But if you'll sit back down, I'll get you a glass of water and I'll sit next to you for the rest of the flight." I'm sure she was thinking, with my handcuffs in case.
Right,
You
right.
know?
Keep an eye on you.
She's
Keeping
like,
an eye on you.
"I will sit right next to you. Don't worry." So she then went and made a phone call. I'm sure she told the captain or the other flight attendants. And then she came and sat next to me. And she started to tell me everything that was going on the plane and reassured me about things. She made me feel very comfortable. She was super sweet. And we ended up landing. But I also have to tell you that I had sweat myself. I don't know if you've ever done that before, but I had sweat from my shoulders to my waist. Like I literally was
God.
I was in a crisis, right? But here's the funny thing. When the plane landed, she came over and said, "Hey, I hope you're okay." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Could I look at your return flight ticket?" And I thought, yeah, that's kind of strange, but maybe she's going to check and tell me that the next flight's, in a bigger plane or it's going to be safer or whatever. But she looked at the ticket and she looked at me and she said, "Thank God." And she walked away. And I said, "Is something wrong?" And she said, "You're not on my return flight." And I'm so thankful.
I love that for her.
But
Yeah.
I thought that was just hilarious that
That's so funny.
she was just like, "Woo."
Thank goodness. No one's going to try to open the door on my flight.
Well, and then, the other crazy part then was, so now I'm in Hawaii. I'm having the time of my life, I think. But of course, I'm stressed out for the 7 days because I've got to fly home or I've got to get home somehow. And we talked about the ferry boat ride, right? And can you imagine what that ride would be like from Honolulu to Los Angeles? So that obviously was never going to happen. But I ended up missing 2 flights going home. I got to the airport and I just couldn't do it. The second flight, I just couldn't do it. And then the third flight, I think I had worn myself down so much. I was so tired. I haven't slept for, maybe even 24 hours. And I'm hanging out in the airport. And finally, that third flight came along and I just got on and I fell asleep. And I woke up in Los Angeles and it was like, I made it. So that's when I was thinking. This was before really people would prescribe medications for flights. But when you were talking about taking, what did you say, Xanax?
Yeah.
And I was thinking maybe I should just take a lot of Xanax and fall asleep and wake up wherever I'm going.
I will say, not a medical doctor, and always, like, to the listeners out there, always
Yeah.
double check with your doctor. It has helped me a lot. But I'm really glad that I've gotten to the point for the shorter flights that I don't necessarily need to take it. Before, I would actually just drink red wine, which is really bad when you want to stay hydrated because alcohol on a plane dehydrates you even more quickly. And I remember the first flight that I took overseas by myself to Scotland. I was super nervous. And I told the flight attendant, she was really sweet, and I asked her for some red wine. So she gave me red wine. And then as soon as I finished it, she came back almost immediately and was like, "Hey, do you want another glass?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, sure. Like, keep it coming." Afterwards, I was just real mellow and relaxed. And I'm convinced she totally did that on purpose. Like, all right, I'm going to be right there with the refill immediately.
She didn't want to have to worry about you.
Actually, not on an overnight flight to Scotland. I remember the exact plane because I was scared of it being a one aisle plane to go overseas from New York. I didn't understand why we were
Yeah.
flying it. Now I know it's perfectly safe to do, but
Yeah.
back then, I didn't. So she
Yeah.
was like, "No, enough to worry about." But you mentioned about like canceling flights and not being able to board, and I hear this is common with a lot of fearful flyers. Were there any other trips that you either missed out on or nearly missed out on because of your fear of flying?
Yeah, I sort of alluded to it in that story about the Delta Airlines pilot. The reason the airline knew and he knew that I was having a problem getting on the plane is because I had missed 2 flights prior to that day. So I showed up to get on the plane to head over to San Diego. I was going to go see Elton John. It was a birthday gift from my husband.
Very
And
nice.
so my husband and his brother and I were going to go see Elton John. And they got on the plane and I got off the plane and I said, "Go without me. I'll get in the car and I'll drive. I have just enough time if I leave now to meet you there." And then I kept thinking, I do not want to get in a car for 12 hours. And so I called my fear of flying coach, Captain Emma, and she talked to me on the phone. "We're going to do it. We're going to get on that plane. We're going to go." And she helped me book another flight. And I got on that plane and I got off that plane. And then this was the third plane where somebody had alerted the captain that I was having issues. And then he came and got me and flew over fine. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's that you get to the point to where you're so frustrated, you just do it. You know, people say, just suck it up. Maybe I just sucked it up. I went, but I do feel like maybe I wasn't ready first thing in the morning, and maybe I hadn't really coached myself well enough. And I think maybe talking to my pilot coach and talking to that pilot, maybe at that point, I just felt able to do it. So when I worked for CBS News, I missed out on a lot of assignments. They would come to me and say, hey, you know, we've got this great story in, I don't know, Hawaii or somewhere, and would you like to be the guy to go? And I would tell them no. And so for a long period of time, I missed out on really great assignments because of my fear of flying. So I'm really, really thankful to be where I'm at today, that I'm able to make those flights.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Like the same thoughts were running through my head when I booked a trip to Japan. It was always a big like dream trip for me. But that flight from Newark to Tokyo is a long flight. It's 14 hours one way and then like 12 and a half back. And I honestly, when I booked the flight, wasn't sure I'd be able to do it because the 7-hour flight to Europe is one thing, but that flight's almost double the length. But I felt like if I just didn't do it, I would never be able to get to Japan. And I did, and I loved it. I remember just like being so thrilled as soon as I saw that sign saying, welcome to Tokyo. I like almost couldn't believe it. It didn't feel real. Like I felt like a director was going to come out and say, cut. And I was going to wake up in my apartment because I just could not believe I actually sat through a flight that long.
Yeah. I did the same thing. The one time I did take an assignment was during the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, Australia. And they came to me and said, we have this trip. It's 2 weeks in Sydney. Do you want it? And I said, yes. And I did it. But I'm like you, I think it was 14 hours maybe, but that's a long time for someone who has a fear of flying. But sometimes I guess you just do what you have to do.
Yeah, you just have to do it. Now, I'm bad with my credit cards. It's kind of an ongoing joke on the podcast. Like going over, I spent a couple $100s to upgrade to premium economy because I couldn't. It was worth burning the money to have a little more comfort and a smaller cabin. But I know it's not always practical to do that either.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
now, one thing that I always constantly hear, so like I said earlier, I personally don't have a fear of flying. My partner, however, he does. Whenever we have a long haul flight, kind of self-medicate, so have a few drinks so he can be like relaxed, nice and calm, go to sleep. But, you know, a lot of people tell him all the time, like, how can you have a fear of flying? You're constantly on a plane. You're constantly traveling. And what people don't understand that, yes, you can constantly be on a plane. You could be traveling on long flights, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a fear. You just find ways to help you kind of overcome that. So I'm just kind of curious, how do you deal with those type of comments from people?
You know, it's hard. I've sort of learned not to tell people that I have fear of flying. On the other hand, it's a little bit difficult for me to not talk about it because now I'm in the business of fear of flying, right? I created a product and I always, you know, pushing the product, trying to get the word out there so people that need it will buy it. Like your husband, Rosa, he probably needs a set of flight deck fear flashcards. But
Definitely.
it's, you know, I don't know. I try to reason with people. I know that people aren't going to understand, but here's the thing that I do know, that your partner has an amazing person in his life, you, Rosa, who is comforting and understanding and still there for him, even though he's having the anxiety. I'm lucky to have that person in my life. And I think we all have people in our lives that try to understand. Maybe they don't understand 100% because I don't think that you can unless you're going through it. But I try to just explain what I'm going through. And I know they're not going to understand it fully. But, you know, another thing I do that doesn't always work is I ask them, do you have a fear of something? And maybe try and talk through whatever their fear is. But it's really interesting how probably half of the people will tell me no, they don't have a fear of anything, which I find hard to believe, but that's usually their answer.
So funny. I'm always very, very open about what scares me. And like with the fear of flying, it's like dark humor. I kind of sometimes make light of it. Like today at work, my coworkers asking me about my flight into Newark because they knew it was gusty. And I was kidding with them. I was like, oh, could you imagine if I missed professional development because my plane flipped over? And they were like, don't even joke about that. What's wrong with you? That's awful. I got scolded at work.
I mean, but that's how I think a lot of us get through some of our stuff with humor. Oh, yeah.
The coping mechanism.
And I think just like you were just mentioning, I think a lot of people don't admit or talk about their fear of flying. And since I started this business and this product, friends are coming out of the woodwork. I have a friend that's been a best friend for years who literally told me 2 days before that she had a fear of flying and I didn't know. And she knew that I had this business and this product. So I quickly got the product together, and she lives 20 minutes from me, and I drove it down to her and she used them and she said it saved her. She's always had a fear of flying, but never talked about it. And I think men mostly don't talk about it. And I think women might talk about it, but everybody's a little worried about talking about it because it seems silly. I think a lot of people with fear of flying think we're going to get made fun of. I don't know, but you should talk about it. You should talk about your fears and anything that bothers you, because someone in the room is going to know something that can help you, right? So if I hadn't been talking to my friend that day and she hadn't told me about her fear of flying, I wouldn't have been able to help her. And so by her finally revealing that she had this, she was able to get on the plane and go have a great time with her husband. So I think you should definitely talk about
Exactly. And
definitely.
validating someone's fear too, because, again, in my personal situation, we travel quite often. So when people make those type of comments, I think it's a little bit ignorant on their part also, because it's a valid fear. And just because, he's able to cope through it and overcome them doesn't mean that he doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
So I think, just validating that as well, it's important. But I'm really intrigued to hear more about the flight deck.
Yeah, it's, I'll tell you kind of how this came about. A friend of mine was getting married and they were going to get married in my hometown. And they asked me if I would be the officiant of the wedding. And I said yes. And a couple of weeks later, they said, we've decided to move the wedding to Florida. And I said, oh, that's great. That's amazing. And I left the conversation at that. And then I went in my room and had a meltdown trying to think, well, I can't let my friends down. How am I going to do this? And so I started doing a lot of research on the fear of flying and how I was going to get over this. And I was going to make this happen, not only for myself, but for my friends and their big day. And I ran into, you may have heard of Lovefly. I think, Rachel, you use Lovefly.
Yes, I was on a podcast episode with them a while back. They're awesome. They're so supportive.
Yeah, I did a podcast with them too. Is it Paul Tazard? He's amazing.
He's wonderful. He's amazing.
Wonderful. He helps everybody, and I love him. So he got me into his groups. I purchased his 30-day program, which is amazing. And the funny thing is, I had 30 days before this wedding, so it was exactly 30 days to get through this course, but it worked for me. The one thing I was doing was I was making notes and writing everything down, like on 3x5 cards. And then I felt really confident, like, this was going to happen for me. And maybe 2 days before the flight, I messaged Paul and said, I'm having a meltdown. He introduced me to Captain Emma, who talked me through what was going to happen. She has a service, and I paid her a fee to kind of coach me and get me on that flight to Florida and back. Great thing is, she gave me all kinds of great advice. She texted me while I was on the flight because I had Wi-Fi and tracked my flight. And she got me there and she got me home, and it was really great. And then she said, after I got back, what was the main thing that helped you, so I know how to continue to help other people? And I said, well, I'll be honest with you. I made these flashcards and I took them with me, and I flipped through these flashcards every step of the flight. From they're going to do an emergency demonstration, they're going to, talk about if there's an accident, what to do, and all these kinds of things that would trigger me, what turbulence was, what it was about. And each card would tell me, this is completely normal, though. This is what happens every time. The lights flicker because they're changing power, and all the different things that happen. And a lot of times when you have anxiety, you can't think about everything that you know or have learned. And so by having the flashcards to remind me every step of the way what was happening is what was working for me. And she got really excited about it and said, wait a minute, send me a picture of the flashcards. And they were just these handwritten, 3x5 cards. And she said, look, let me look at all of your cards, refine them for you, so I know that you're saying the right things or using the right steps, and then let's make them available to the public. So that's what we did. And we came up with Flight Deck Fear of Flying flashcards, and they look like this. I know they're probably reversed in the camera, but they're basically my notes and everything that I was teaching myself or learning and putting into these cards. And then we just made them into a commercial product. And now we sell them on our website, flightdeck365.com. And they come in a couple of different colors. We have a download. If you were ready to go on a flight in 5 minutes, you could download these onto your smartphone and take off. I have pilots and flight attendants who will tell people to download them on their phone before the flight takes off. And generally, they'll give them a code. Here's a discount code. as a passenger. Get these on your phone right now. And one of the reasons why flight attendants love them is because I think they feel like at least they're able to help somehow, right? I mean, a flight attendant could say, oh, everything will be fine. Sit down, buckle your seatbelt. But if they're able to give them a set of these cards, a lot of flight attendants have these in their tote bag, or help them download them onto their phone, the flight attendant probably is not going to have to sit with that crazy passenger the whole flight. And they can, attend to everyone else and not have to give me as much special attention as I probably think that I need. And then I can sit and just flip through these cards that'll tell me that turbulence is not going to kill me, and that, it happens and it's uncomfortable, but that it's normal. And here's another thing that comes with the cards is there's some tips and tricks telling you, what you should bring to the airport, what you should do. I don't know if you've ever had your ears get, what would you say, stuffed up, clogged,
Yeah,
got
definitely.
pressure. So, one of the cards will tell you, chew gum. As the plane starts to taxi, get some gum going, because that'll get your ears open back up and you won't have that pain. And then it's got an essentials checklist in it. So it'll tell you the things that you should bring to the airport with you, and empty water bottles, so that after you get through security, you can fill the water bottle. Just things like that. And, these are just things that I used on my handwritten cards that reminded me of everything that I needed to do before I got to the airport, at the airport, and on the airplane. And then this is my favorite card, if I can find it. I messed up these cards while I was flipping through them, trying to be a show off. Here's my favorite card, though. I tell people all the time, take a picture of yourself with this card on the flight. But this is the one that says, congratulations, you have landed, and you should be proud of yourself.
I love that one too. I love the smiley faces. It's like, yes, I did it.
Right? Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of it in a nutshell. And, I get emails daily from people telling me how much the cards help them. And I feel great. I feel like I've been able to help people. And, it's really funny. But in the beginning, I thought my cards were silly and nobody would want them. And suddenly they were on the market and everybody was buying them. So kind of the story behind Flight Deck.
That's amazing. And it is really, really helpful. There's one flight that comes to mind, and it actually wasn't me on the plane. It was my dad. And he was sitting near two pilots who just happened to be going home. They weren't actually working the flight, but they were saying everything that was going on and they were discussing it. My dad was saying just how comforting that was. And it's like, of course, you can't always rely on a flight attendant or a pilot to just be there to explain every step of the way. But if you have these flashcards, it really does help, because if you don't fly frequently, it is really new and you can be really uncertain. Like I remember when I first started flying, again, with this fear of flying, whenever the little bell would go off when the plane would hit 10,000 feet, I thought that meant there was an emergency.
There's actually a card in here for that talks about the sounds, the chimes that you're going to hear, and that they're not secret codes and they're not warning signs, that they're just communication. Let's see, you will hear chimes. These sounds are used for communication between flight crew and the cabin crew. Chimes are not warning signals. This is normal, because I used to think the same thing. I was like, I don't know what she's telling her, but we're about to go down.
Yep.
It was never that.
Yep, that was me. I was always like, oh my God, the chimes are going on. It would be like, welcome to the friendly skies. If you want to sign up for a credit card, and I'd be like, oh, this is nothing. Thank God.
It was the chime to remind them to try and sell you a credit card.
Exactly. No emergency.
It's always the
here.
fear of the unknown, when you don't understand something and you're not sure. So I think it's great that you have even the basic information on there. That's great.
Yeah. And I think that's what this does, is it gives you some knowledge about what's happening, and it just gives you the reassurance that it's normal. And back to what you were saying, Rachel, is I joke a lot of times that the Flight Deck Fear of Flying flashcards are like having a pilot in your pocket. So you can pull them out of your pocket, and as though a pilot was sitting next to you and telling you all of these things, you got them right here in your hand. I've had pilots on planes see me flipping through my cards and ask me what I was doing. And so I'll show them to them, explain it to them. And they're like, I need these. And they'll end up usually ordering a deck or two and keeping them with them for passengers that have fear of flying.
It's really awesome. And it's just like helping others. That's so rewarding, knowing that you're making an impact, because if you're flying, it's a very real fear. And even though statistically it's not dangerous, the danger does feel very present, and having that reassurance is important.
Yeah. One thing I have noticed recently with these last two incidences, so it's been quite a while since we've had a major airline incident.
Yeah.
but I'm noticing a lot of people who didn't have a fear of flying suddenly have a fear of flying. And my message boards and my Facebook groups are bigger than ever. There's more people in those groups now than I've ever seen, and more activity, more people talking about their fear of flying. And interestingly enough, I've seen messages from flight attendants that are now nervous, that are saying, I don't know if I want to continue to do this job anymore. So it's really kind of a hot topic right now. And I think it's really, a lot of people are kind of getting caught off guard with their fear of flying, especially, someone like that didn't have fear of flying before. There was the accident the day before and they've got a flight the next day. I know they're really thinking about that. And I know there's a lot of people who have flight anxiety and they still just do it versus someone like me who had a terrifying fear. But I think it's really interesting of how many people are now coming forward with their fears.
Yeah, it's really true. I definitely notice it on threads. Like a lot of people are discussing their fear of flying. And I've actually received a couple of messages from people because I make it very clear that I have a fear of flying and I do what I can to help them. But that leads to my next question, which is somebody who has a new fear of flying. They've never experienced this, but they're a new fearful flyer. What sort of advice would you give them to guide them? Because like you said, with the last two incidents, it's stirred up a lot of unsettling feelings in a lot of people.
I think those people are the ones who you probably could give the statistics to, because they're probably maybe not so far in deep in their fear that they might might respond to those statistics. But I would definitely encourage them to seek help. I talk to family members about it. I would encourage them to get on a message board or Love Fly's Facebook group and talk to other people about it. I think once you realize you're not the only one with this fear and that there is help, I think that helps. I would also encourage you to get help right away. Don't let it grow, because that's what I did. Is I sort of let that fear simmer, and it grew and it grew and it grew. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to maintain my fear, right? So I don't fall back into that. And I think I would tell people that. And I would also give them all my tips and tricks on how I kind of got over it. I'm really curious how I'm going to feel on my next flight. I've got a flight coming up in a couple of months. I'm feeling pretty good about it now, but I think Rachel, and probably Rosa, your partner knows, a lot of times it creeps up on you when you get to the airport. And then suddenly you're like, oh, wait, okay, I don't think I was as far along as I really was. So I don't know. It'll be interesting, but I would definitely encourage them to reach out for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I've been mostly telling people to check out the Love Fly Facebook group and podcast. And I've also been recommending a subreddit called Fear of Flying on Reddit, which is really good.
I'm
on that too. They're great. And there are a lot of flight attendants and pilots and meteorologists even who are in the group who will help. I remember my flight to Barcelona. I actually had a flight attendant. She was a brand new flight attendant. I think she said she was 21 years old, sending me DMs, reassuring me about my flight to Barcelona. And I'm thinking in my head, oh my gosh, I could have probably taught you as a student. And you're hand holding me through this flight, because it hit me at the airport. It'll come on unexpectedly. And it's geez, how much longer do I have to deal with this?
I think that airlines in the United States are going to start catching up with airlines from other countries. I know Virgin and British Airways have fear of flying programs. And I think it would be great if every airport had a psychologist or somebody on staff that could talk to you about these things, because I think in reality, there's a lot of people who have this fear of flying. I think a lot of people realize it when they're finally at the airport. And I think that if we could help people out while they're maybe having that mini crisis at the airport, I think it would really be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think I read somewhere that some airports have therapy dogs to help people, and that's just wonderful. Go hug a dog. It'll make it all better.
Our airport here in Salt Lake City has a group of them, and they give out there's baseball cards, but it's all the information about the dog and their stats and stuff like that. It's really cool. But they do roam our airport. I see them every time I'm there.
Aw. I wish we had therapy dogs, Rosa, at Newark. Wouldn't that be fun?
I think we should just have therapy dogs around us all the time.
All the time.
I need them at school, too. Me and the students, we want therapy dogs at school, the airport, the leasing office can have them.
I know.
They
bring my dog with me.
I clearly have one. He keeps interrupting the podcast, so...
He's excited to talk about flying. It's all good.
So you'll have to go watch my video on TikTok. It's Flight Deck 365 on TikTok, and I did one of those things where I tried to make it look like my dog was talking. That's pretty cute. So check it out if you get a chance.
That's adorable. So, Brian, do you have any final words for our listeners or for them to overcome their fear? And I think you brought up a good point too. Speaking to someone, I think making sure that somebody, is validating your fears and your feelings and feeling acknowledged, I think is definitely part, or at least one step of the way, right?
I think that probably is my parting message. I think we've already talked about it, but I'll bring it up again. I think tackle this fear sooner than later, and I know that you can get over this fear of flying. You can get past this fear of flying. There was a point in my life that I thought this would never happen. I would never get on a plane again, and that I was never going to be able to get over it. And if I did have to fly for something unfortunate like a family member's funeral, I was just going to have to suck it up and sweat it out. But I'm thankful that I stuck to it and that I realized that you can get over this. And I did, for the most part, get over it. And I'm really thankful that I pushed forward. And I think people should push forward and get to where they feel comfortable and great about flying. And look at you two. I mean, flying all over the world and seeing amazing things and loving your life and learning culture and enrichment. And I just think it's amazing. I'm so proud of you guys.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. So before we close out, do you want to reiterate your social media handles so people know how to find you and to find your product?
Yeah, I have a card for that. You know what's funny is people will message me, do you have a card for this? Do you have a card for that? And sometimes they're just being funny. I had somebody message me the other day. I guess there was an unruly passenger on the plane, and somebody texted me, do you have a card for that? I'm like, no, I don't, but maybe I should put one in there.
That could be part 2 of the flight
deck. Yes.
Yeah. But in the very last card, of course, just talks about all our social media. But on Facebook, we're Flight Deck. And on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, we're Flight Deck 365. And if you just want to check us out on the web, we're flightdeck365.com. And that's where our store is at. If you go on to flightdeck365.com, you can click on the shop and you can see all of our products, our t-shirts, our cases. We have these really cool cases. These are wooden bamboo cases. These are like for, people who want to think that they're, kind of expensive and they can keep their cards in a bamboo case.
Love those. That's where I keep mine. They're fancy.
Yeah. You're fancy, Rachel. So yeah, we have, different items on there, but of course the star of the show is our Flight Deck Fear of Flying flashcards. They're helping people all over the world, and I'm very excited about that. And I'm really thankful for the opportunity to be on here today and be able to tell people about it, because my goal is to help as many people as I can to get to the place I am with my fear of flying. And I know that people can do it.
Yeah, definitely. And we really appreciate you being on here. And for any listeners who are nervous flyers, we're here for you. Feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Brian, to Rosa. We're here to support you all, and we want to help you see the world. So that's going to do it for today's episode of Bon Voyage Besties. Go out there, see the world. Don't be afraid. It's just a little turbulence, not going to hurt you. And enjoy your trip. Bon Voyage Besties. Have fun. We love you guys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Brian.
Bye.
See you. Have a great day.